Welcome to the SOULFAM podcast. On today's episode, Raymond Posh, who is a way shower for these crazy times of change. He has taken a deep interest in spirituality and consciousness. He is the author of Awakening to Wholeness. He also has two podcasts, which I'll let him introduce. He blogs excessively, can I say that? And does a lot of reflection on what's happening currently in sort of our spiritual community, what's happening energetically. He's made very strong connections with the angels, with higher councils, and with God Source. Raymond, thank you so much for being on the podcast. Can you share a little bit about what you're working on these days and what inspired your interest?
Sure. Yes. And thank you for asking me to join you. I won't give you my whole story right now, but the last few years have been very interesting for me. And this year in particular, I have just gone through incredible changes, but I've been a spiritual seeker for a long time. I refer to myself as a spiritual explorer, and because that's the way I started, and so I've explored spirituality in many different ways and different depths, and that led me to my podcast. And my first podcast, Our Spiritual Life, is a general podcast about spirituality, in general terms and in very, very broad. My current podcast is New Ways of Being, and it is much more focused on exactly what that says, on helping people be in new and more effective ways, more conscious ways for themselves and their presence in the world. So I've been very involved from a podcast point of view. And then this year, I suddenly had brand new things begin to happen, and I won't spell it out right at the moment here, let it roll a bit here, but it's been a fun year, and for me, a very exciting year in terms of the spiritual breakthroughs that I've had.
That's really interesting. How long would you say you've sort of focused on this? Because I sense that you had a more serious background before. Not that this isn't serious. I don't mean that, but that there was a more formal sort of background. Were you an engineer? What was your previous sort of?
A good perception there. My whole career was in information technology, and I was, started as a software engineer, became a IT manager, and eventually I kind of settled in as a project manager. I really love to manage projects. So, yes, in the corporate world, yes, very serious, technical. It's all about the business. But still, along the way, other things began to happen for me in terms of spirituality.
Mm-hmm.
So let me just tell you real quickly, and the audience, in college, I was raised as a Catholic. In college, I basically dropped out of spirituality. I consider myself an atheist, and I was an atheist for many, many years. And I would say a contented atheist, happy with my life. And all of a sudden, I had a very strange event occur that was a wake-up call for me. And it was, some people would say, well, that's just an interesting coincidence, but I'll tell it real quickly. I was working as a software engineer. It was 1993. I remember that. And I decided over lunch hour one day to go to the nearby computer bookstore just to look around. So I did. I was looking around. I saw an interesting looking book. I picked it up. I opened to a totally random page, and there was my name. And
What?
I don't know if you've ever had anything like that happen, or somebody call out your name in an airport or something where it's totally by surprise, and it's shocking. But in a book, published book, and I did not know my name was in this book. And there's more to the story, but let me kind of short. I really felt at that point that it was beyond coincidence, and that it was the universe getting my attention, something to the effect of saying, there's more to the universe than you realize, and that you might want to explore into this. And that put me on a course of spiritual exploration. So in that exploration, I read hundreds of spiritual books. I studied all types of spiritual backgrounds or philosophies. I didn't want to home in on one thing. And I came to a number of beliefs that I feel very strongly about. I do believe in God at this point. And so as that my life kind of comes from there. I knew that basically in the learning that I did, realized I was just very, very interested in spirituality and how that can improve a person, improve me, and change one's life. And so, yeah, that's where it started.
Do you remember the title of the book?
I did know it. It's not coming to mind right at the moment,
Right.
but the relationship to the book was I was a writer and I had written an article that was published in Software Magazine about enterprise systems. Oh, that was the name of the book. Enterprise Computing was the name of the book. Yeah. So that's how he quoted my article in depth. And I don't think, actually, I think I did meet the author at one point, at least by phone. So, but
interesting. And that
yeah,
inspired your sense of that there was something deeper beyond either both which you were doing and both how you saw spirituality.
right.
Do
Because,
you remember that moment, by the way? Do you remember the feeling that you had in that moment?
well, it was very much a feeling of shock. It was I called it a wake up call. I would say yes, it was a spiritual awakening of sorts, but not the kind of spiritual awakenings that came to me
Right.
over the years. So
Right. It was a big knock on your door.
yes,
That's interesting. Well, I have a sense that your mind likes to it's I hope you don't find this as a criticism, but my sense is that you compartmentalize things and put things together very succinctly and have a sense of sort of the algorithm of it or the equation of it. So it would make sense that if God's trying to reach you, it's like, here's a book. This is in, black and white. So here's your sign.
yes. Well, yeah, I'd say you're kind of right. I don't know if I feel exactly the way you described it, but I've always been very logical and
Exactly.
kind of on the science side of things instead of the spiritual side of things.
Exactly.
But I had discovered somewhere along the way that my style of thinking was not just analytical, but also involved synthesis.
Right.
And so taking a lot of inputs in and processing it, and not necessarily in any structured way.
Right. But then being able to communicate it in a way that we can comprehend, that we can digest very easily, very
Yes,
succinctly,
that
very
actually,
efficiently.
when I discovered that, I realized, oh, well, that's why I'm having some difficulties sometimes communicating. I can kind of foresee things or
Right.
see how things tie together and work without explaining it, And at that point, I learned, well, maybe I should do more explaining about where my ideas come from.
Right. It's interesting. I'm asking specifically about that moment because I think people have their moments in their awakenings or in their understandings or in their recognizing of their own talents and of their own sort of God-given abilities that perhaps even marry science with spirituality and then communication as what you're doing.
Yes.
You're sort of bringing it all home in a way that we can digest and incorporate into our own being, into our own lives.
Right. Well, I have to add a comment there that, but I have to do a very quick explanation. For about the last year, well, I discovered a book called The Wisdom of the Council, and I became an avid student of the council, of their teachings, initially in the book. And one of the things that the council talks about in terms of what's happening on Earth today
Mm-hmm.
is that, yeah, there is this awakening or ascension that is in process, and that they talk about, and they kind of give their definition of the fifth dimension,
Mm-hmm.
and we're coming from the third dimension being uh, totally a consciousness that's based in separation, fourth dimension being focused on transformation, with spirituality as a tool, I guess you could say, for that. And the fifth dimension is stepping into a higher consciousness based in love,
Mm.
and in seeing the world in terms of consciousness, and not necessarily about spirituality anymore.
Right.
So yeah, I find that to be an interesting definition. So now I have to tell you a little bit more,
Right.
and,
It's
and that
sort of a shift in our existence. It's not even in spirituality necessarily, but it's in our processes and in our beyond. It's beyond our perceptions. It's the way we even function.
yes, that's right. If we change our consciousness, we change our systems. How we exist, as you said.
So tell me more.
But so the interesting thing that happened to me early this year in 2024 is that I got into crystal pendants because someone that
Mhm.
I respected told me how a crystal pendant had changed his life. And I'd always been very dismissive of crystals and believing that they could do anything. But I decided, well, I'll give it a chance. I'll get one and see if I notice anything, and I did. And I came to find out that I the crystals helped me shift my energy level, my vibration level, sufficiently high that suddenly I could communicate with God and the angels. And in my case, once that started happening, and it was in the form of telepathic conversations, I don't it's channeling, but I
Right.
don't channel as a download. I channel through a conversation. And I began channeling at that point with the council, directly asking them questions about the book.
Interesting. Who is the author of that book, by the way? And would you repeat that? Because I
Sarah,
know
Landon is the channel.
Sarah Landon, of course.
Yes, and she's an incredible channel, and
Mm-hmm.
she does it in the mode of letting the council speak through her, and I don't do that. So I channel the council in a completely different way, and I think there are some advantages to doing it by telepathic conversation, because then I ask questions and
Right.
get immediate answers.
Right. I think that's interesting. So I'm just curious, Raymond. So I of course, watched Sarah several times and appreciate everything she's doing and her bravery and willingness to do it, just like you. So, in doing it telepathically, do you find it's like a conversation like you and I would have almost?
Yes, yes, I do. There was a learning process that I went through when I began doing it. A person, and probably this is true of channeling broadly, but I'm not sure exactly how it works
Mhm.
for others. But for myself, the higher vibration opened the door for me to be able to connect to spiritual beings.
Mhm.
But when I communicate, I have to be in a particular state of being, because, and if I'm not, then I will suddenly notice that's my own thinking that's interjecting. So to avoid that from happening, I have to be in a state of total presence. The stronger, the clearer that is, the better, and in a state of reception primarily.
So, do you do a little ritual, a little ceremony, something like that, or do you find it's
I
kind of you just tap in?
Yeah, I don't do it as any particular ritual. When I do it, I shift into a state of presence first, and I reach out to whoever I'm wanting to communicate with,
Hmm.
God or angels or a specific angel or the council. And it's very interesting. I've always noticed the connection has always been immediate for me. So my ritual is getting into presence first and then connecting.
Is that a challenge? Because I know, I mean, I can certainly be distracted on multiple or be stressed out about a variety of things. Do you find, is there a trick to getting into a sense of presence? And is that the now presence that you
The now
feel?
the now presence, and I learned that from Eckhart Tolle.
Yes.
And so I use inner body awareness as my primary technique for shifting into presence.
Mm-hmm.
And but I do always want to eliminate distractions because again, I need to be 100% focused in a state of
Mm-hmm.
awareness, not in thinking at all. If you get into thinking,
Hmm.
then then what you're receiving immediately becomes some suspect. you know, I think people can realize that if they were to begin to experience it. But just in terms of advice, yes, you have to be very, very focused and avoiding distraction.
Do you find that presence relaxing?
Yes, I do. And by the way this started for me was I had taken a training from Seth Dietland.
Mm-hmm.
And Seth, in the course I took, he taught to use automatic writing, journaling with
Mm-hmm.
automatic writing.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the way I started. And I still stay with that for the most part. I can channel while I'm, I can have a conversation while I'm walking down the street, but um, I love the ability to sit, be in that writing mode. It is focusing and it captures both sides of the conversation. I capture what I'm saying and what the angels or God is saying, and always write it down. And they are always totally patient while I write it down. There's no rush, and I've always found those conversations to be 100% friendly. God is pure goodness, angels are pure goodness, the council is pure goodness. So yeah, there's channeling by itself doesn't just come instantaneously. There is a little bit of a learning process.
I'm curious, Raymond, since we're sort of talking about this telepathic communication, and I feel like that's part of our existence in the fifth dimension. And I think probably any of us who are sort of shifting or not shifting, but maybe getting some clues to shift, that aspect of being in the now presence and being able to telepathically communicate is not just about something to do with God source or the angels or the council, but even within ourselves, our ability personally to communicate telepathically. Is that part of what's happening in the fifth dimension or that we're shifting, moving towards?
That's an interesting question, and I think the answer is yes. You're right. Um, the fifth dimension is all about becoming more conscious,
Mm-hmm.
and so when we do anything like you've referred to there, that is all about consciousness. It's being more conscious of who we are, more conscious of the world, more conscious of what might be beyond, might be in the spiritual realm.
Right.
And so, yeah, you could say it's for those people who are stepping into new ways of being,
Right.
uh, that's what's happening. It's about becoming more conscious because we are conscious, we are beings of consciousness.
Mm-hmm.
And that's very important. In my spiritual exploration, 20 some years ago, whenever it was, I, what my conclusion was is that the center of the universe and of existence is pure consciousness. And religions call that God. And I I didn't used to call it God, but now I call it God because it's a convenient word and people have a general idea of what that is. I do know that some people have a lot of fear about the word God and get wrapped up in that.
Mhm.
And I did myself, I think, at one point in time. But fortunately, I've gotten beyond that. Yeah, the whole exploration of consciousness and how we can be in the world. I find it to be a just fascinating subject to live
Mhm.
in and to talk about.
When you connect with the council, is there a specific reason that you do? Is there a purpose behind it? Are you called to connect because they want to get a message to you, or are you seeking something?
So it started for me with the book, The Wisdom of the Council. And that book, probably far more than any other book I can think about, spoke to me. I guess I could say, in a way, called to me, but it spoke to me in the kind of language I wanted to hear. And I really related to it. And the council was giving this very, I want to say human, but that's probably not the right word, very personal, very guidance directed to human beings in particular, because they are very concerned about humanity and humanity's evolution of consciousness right now. And so I really got in tune with the council through the book first. And then when I became able to have the telepathic conversations, then that gave me a way I could speak directly to the council, ask them questions, get clarifications, and continue that learning process with them.
Mhm.
And they talk about some very powerful kinds of things about mastery and creating not just more consciously, but more powerfully. And
Mm.
they talk about much more. But so that the book was the perfect thing for me at the right time, and and that was just the kind of thing that, well, it's ended up changing my life.
Mhm.
Yeah, even before I had a sense of being called to, originally I thought in terms of being a spiritual teacher of some form,
Mhm.
but I never, I struggled to determine what form that was going to be.
Right.
Now, later, I mean, God tells me, you're not a spiritual teacher. That's formulaic. You are a way shower. You are an explorer. And that rang 100% true. I've always been an explorer. Even as a kid, I was an explorer. And so I'm continuing that. Like I say, life has just turned into this incredible adventure right now.
It's very, very cool. When they say when you say or they say that it's not just about consciousness, but it's about communicating a message more powerfully. What's that about? Is that about understanding that we ourselves as sovereign beings are actually more powerful than we think?
Okay, and I said I used the word powerful in relationship to creation,
Okay.
our process of creation, not, and that wasn't about communication
Okay.
necessarily, but things do overlap.
Well, I may have misunderstood. So the creative force is more
Yes,
powerful. Okay. So can
yes,
you
and we
share with us what that means?
yes, it still does come from the council, but
Yes.
now I understand something that they talk about in the book totally clearly. They talk about being a true creator, and a true creator is one who expresses the full power of being able to create, you know. And by the way, I believe that I call it the mission. Our mission
Mhm.
is, God wanted from the beginning human beings to have wonderful lives and to have that happen by being creators of what they desire, the life that they desire. And so most of us, you know, don't even relate to what that means or to its potential. And so the book in the council, they talk about coming from the third dimension. We are very focused on lack
Mhm.
and the kind of creation that we do, whether it's through some type of intended manifestation, or through just what is being created for us is from lack and from need. And it's
Mm.
very needy. And we tend to also be very wrapped up in trying to figure things out. And, uh,
We are.
but true creation is getting past that, beginning to live more in the fifth dimension from love and understanding what that means in the universe, and from being who we truly are, spiritual beings and creators. And then as we fully step into that, we start creating our dreams.
Mm.
Not $1,000 we're trying to come up with today. We see beyond that. We create this bigger, better life that is based in having fun and creating not just a better life, but a fantastic life. That makes us dance every day.
So we have not mastered our sense of being true creators.
I'd say most people have not. Now, some people, I do know that some people have, yes, but not, 99%, are coming from separation and lack and fear, and that's what drives life
Right.
for them.
So is part of this part of the mission, part of our existence here on earth to grab that golden ring of being a true creator and be masters of ourselves as well as sort of masters of the universe.
Yes, yes, and I think that's exactly. I don't know that the council used that phrase, but
Right.
they've spoken in those terms, that
Mm.
there are dimensions that humans unknowingly participate in today that open doors for life that we can't even imagine. And so, yes, you were right on.
So I have a question about all this, and I don't know if this is something you can answer, but maybe the council understands it, or maybe there's an aspect of this that can address this. So, just watching what's happening on the planet at the moment, and certainly watching southeastern United States suffer severely at the moment. And I am sure talking to anybody who's trying to dig themselves out of the mud or find insulin for their loved one or all of the suffering that's going on at the moment, to
Right.
suggest that we think beyond the very material right this second, is that pushing it?
Yeah. Well, another good question. There's definitely a huge issue there in for the evolution of human consciousness.
Mhm.
But just looking at individuals, yes, I totally understand that. From what I've been saying, some people would tune it out and say, "Well, that's fantastic," but
Right,
I don't clearly see how to get there, and there's not a,
right.
a, a clearly defined path, but
Mm.
it does require the choice. I want to raise my consciousness and change my life, and so that's a beginning point, and different teachers or different paths will speak to different people in different ways. We do need more people speaking publicly,
Uh-huh.
I would say, about that there are possibilities beyond what uh, most people are talking about, and to at least put it out there. But you're absolutely right. I mean that is a hurdle.
That's a hurdle. However, I'm gonna tell a little side story here just because 'cause we're talking about it, and it occurs to me. I was on Facebook last night watching, some people talk about their experiences during this post-storm, and a gal in, Eastern Tennessee and her family went to rescue or to help a friend of theirs whose home was nearly pretty much destroyed, and their kids. And she said God kept showing up throughout the entire day. She said she would, and she's very much a believer. She would think, or she would say to herself, I really wish we had water for all the people that are helping here at this house. Somebody would show up with gallons of water. I really wish we had a backhoe so we could start digging out the backyard, which is full of debris and trunks, and somebody would drive down the street with a backhoe. Or she showed up with her, with her kids and her husband, and they're in their boots and their gloves, but they didn't have any tools. Well, somebody drove by and he's like, I think you need tools, don't you? And walked up to the house and brought them crowbars and hammers and,
Oh,
this, that, and the other thing. And she said all day long, God kept showing up for them.
wow. Yeah, that's incredible. And that's good. And that is heartwarming for one thing to see that there are people stepping up and putting themselves more on the line to help.
I think I'm curious if that speaks also to the validation, perhaps, that we can be the true creators. If we are in that now moment and in that presence and in that frequency, so to speak, then we can become the true creators.
Yes.
Okay.
I'd say that's true. Yes.
Trying to get this down, Raymond, so we can make this all happen. Because I think you recognize, and you're sort of humble about all this, but I think you recognize the power of each of us as humans.
Yes, we have enormous power. And, one answer I could give is it has so much to do with attitude and in wanting to move past what we see wrong with the world, so, and everyone can do that in little ways, and that opens the door for more conscious choices, etc. So there it is, kind of like getting a snowball rolling, I think.
Is that how you feel that it sort of feels like we're snowballing a little bit. There's been a lot of sort of sense of awakening even in the last few months, but to really take it as our own, perhaps that's a bit more of a leap.
Yeah. I missed part of that. I think we were having a little bit of an internet connection problem
I'm
there.
sorry. I'm sure it's my microphone. What I was saying was that it felt like, the energy has shifted a lot in the last year. Is my sound coming through? And so my sense is that there's been a lot of awakening sort of starting to happen just in this last year. I know you've been at it a long time. I've sort of been at it myself for a long time in different sorts of ways. But
Yep.
grasping this and making this really part of our existence is still another step to take. Is that correct?
Yeah. Yes, and I observe it too. I do think there's more awakening happening with individuals. I don't have any idea about any kind of numbers. It's still
It's true.
probably fairly few people, but every bit helps in the bigger picture, and potentially in a multiplicative way. Are you familiar with Power versus Force by David Hawkins?
I am not. You mentioned that the other day during the meetup group, but I'd love to learn more about it.
Well, one of the things that he taught was, he discovered that there's a what's the word he uses? That there are levels of consciousness that form a continuous spectrum of consciousness. That the more that people are at higher consciousness, and we can just talk about love, they are contributing to the consciousness of humanity as a whole. So, and it's like 1,000,000 to 1 kind of thing. Those more conscious people are having a very powerful influence on human consciousness in total. The more that we get, the more, the more it accelerates. So it is an accelerating process.
Interesting. It's almost a domino effect.
The what effect?
It's almost a bit of a domino effect.
Yeah, well, you could say that.
So, as a collective,
but it's beyond that.
it's
A domino effect
exponential.
is linear. But
Uh-huh.
what I'm talking about is exponential. So, yeah, but I mean, that's an analogy that could be used. Yes.
That's a simple way, but it's really more about it's almost like a pool or a puddle, so that there's you know a small amount in the puddle, and then it expands and expands and expands exponentially. It's interesting because I'm always trying to understand how things work in the metaphysical sense, and perhaps I should just drop that whole attitude, but I really want to understand it, because once I understand it, it can be a part of me. So
Yes.
that's how my brain tends to work. So I'm going to back up just a second here about how you and I got connected, which is that we met through Seth Dietland, who has been a guest on this podcast 2 or 3 times and was also very helpful in helping me to get this podcast started. Seth is founder of Talk to My Angels and is a very powerful communicator with angels. A little underrated, I'm going to say, but he's very, very powerful. He's given some very specific and very clear understanding of what's happening from the angelic realm to our listeners and viewers. So, one of the things you talked about in our connection earlier this week was about the use of frequency. And I was fascinated by that in understanding frequency, because we sort of talk a lot about raising our frequency and la 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 la, and I need to be at 800 or 900 or whatever. But that's not really, I mean, that is helpful, but you take it much further and you're much more expansive about it and much more specific about it as well. Can we talk about that a little bit?
Okay. Yes. And it was a case for me that it started with the high energy crystal pendants that I started wearing, was shifting my energy or vibrational frequency higher.
Mm-hmm.
Then I took some trainings from a quantum energy expert and healer
Mm-hmm.
named Joshua Bloom.
Mm.
And from Joshua, I learned energy techniques, and he talks specifically in terms of quantum energy, but very much he's an energy healer. And so I learned to raise my energy or vibration through techniques. He doesn't use this term, but I do. Direct energy induction. I've developed this course called Become a Master of Life, and in it I talk a lot about God energy. And God energy is my term for source energy or subtle energy. It's energy that exists throughout the universe. It is everywhere in everything. And we can tap into that in very powerful ways if we understand that, everything is energy, and that if we consciously use what I call God energy
Mm-hmm.
to help us create and to help us change our level of awareness, etc. It's it all works. But anyway, I raised my energy by initially by pulling in energy from the quantum field all around me.
Mm-hmm.
And Joshua, he talks about pulling it down from the celestial realm and pulling it up from the earth itself. But what I quickly realized is that, and energy techniques are pretty common among spiritual teachers, and they will say something like, imagine a ball of energy
Right.
flowing into your body from above. What I discovered was, well, we feel it. We actually feel that happening because it is 100% real. It
Mm.
is not imaginary. We are tapping into that subtle energy of the universe and using it and feeling it. But because we are effectively, our body is made of energy, but we also are surrounded with a field of energy. So when we talk about frequency, we're talking about vibration in our energy field. So it's correct to call it energy, and it's correct to call it frequency or vibration. All those terms work, but
Mm-hmm.
we can use that to raise our energy much higher than most people do. Now, in the spiritual world, everybody talks about, oh, you got to raise your energy, raise your
Right.
vibration. And they'll give some ways to do that. And one way is to focus on love
Mhm.
and being in a state of love.
Mhm.
And that is one of the more powerful ways, but it only raises your energy so much. And what I ended up learning, I learned through muscle testing how to test that energy frequency. And then when I learned to communicate with God, I asked about, it seems like that was critical for me to be able to communicate with you, God. And I asked the question, do we have to raise our energy to a certain level? And God said, if you have the techniques to measure it, it would be 100,000 vibrations per second or higher that you would want to have. Being in a normal state of unconditional love, for me, when I measured it, it raised my energy level to about 20,000
Mhm.
vibrations per second.
Mhm.
So that by itself was not enough. The crystals made a difference, and so did the energy induction.
So that is not, just because we're talking numbers here, 20,000 is not unconditional love.
It's not reaching the threshold of being able to communicate with spiritual beings in spite of all the EMF
Mhm.
radiation that we have in the atmosphere, and in spite of stress and other
Mhm.
toxins in our bodies and minds.
Interesting. So how I want to ask about muscle testing, and you explained this the other day. And then, of course, I want to talk about the crystals. And is it necessary to have those crystals in order to raise your vibration? Or can you raise your vibration without that?
Yes, you can through what I call direct energy induction. When I first learned it, I uh, I felt that there was somewhat of a limitation to how much that can raise your frequency.
Mhm.
But I think since then I've learned, if your intention is to raise your vibration to at least 100,000, you
Mhm.
can, with just calling on the universe, calling on the quantum field, and consciously choosing to raise your vibration.
So just to break it down, does that mean our vibration, is that our sense of our auric field? Is that our Merkabas? Is that our cellular vibration? What exactly is our vibration?
I'm pausing here because from what I had learned from about quantum energy from Joshua, there's several things involved in answering that.
Mhm.
I would say it's not exactly the same as our cellular energy, but cells participate in our energy field. And the more that we relate to our cells, the more that we can tap into the energy. Joshua talks about when he does transformation work and healing work, he focuses on the flow of energy in your body between cells. And,
Oh,
and
okay.
he teaches that you do not transform until you do move energy through your cells. Yeah, I think there's kind of like two levels of energy in a way that we're touching on there, but but the subtle energy is everywhere,
Mhm.
and but it is powerful for us to feel it in our bodies, and feel it at a cellular. And in order to do that, we have to think and relate to our body at a cellular level. So
Okay.
it starts getting into a little bit of a tricky discussion, but to really, I don't know that I understand it in deep scientific depth or
Mhm.
any other, but I do see that it works and that we have the ability to raise our vibration probably much higher than we think, most people.
Yeah. 100,000 sounds like a lot. I'm like, "Really? Is that possible? Can I do that?" I thought I was doing okay, but it's really interesting.
Well, it sounds like a lot,
Mhm.
but in my year that's happened to me, I made this big breakthrough in beyond what I mentioned in becoming a master myself. And part of that was fully accepting that I am a part of God, that I am as an extension of God. I use that term. I'm an extension of God. And to step fully into that, because that is where stepping fully into your power is. It is in knowing that you are a divine being and you have infinite resources available to you if you can get past all of the blockages in belief saying,
Mm-hmm.
no, I no, you know, I don't see it. How does that work? It's through the power of the divine.
Could you explain muscle testing?
As I said the other day in Seth's get together, I want to spend some more time on this and actually get to a point where I can teach it 100% reliably. Let's see here. Where are we at? The way I learned it,
Mm-hmm.
oh, let me back up. It's based on kinesiology,
Mm-hmm.
and kinesiology is best done with two people. Chiropractors do kinesiology. So the chiropractor has the patient hold out his arm, and he might give the person a bottle of supplements and test whether those help or not. Or you can even test with a donut. Does a donut help? Nope. Because
Right.
the chiropractor teaches it by pushing the arm down. If the arm goes down immediately and the more it drops, the more deleterious, I guess is the word,
Mm-hmm.
more harmful that substance, and you can do it with thoughts as well. But at any rate, so muscle testing of this type is for one person to be able to do it themselves. You hold out your non-dominant arm,
Mm-hmm.
and with your other arm holding two fingers, you push down. And the measurement is, in this particular case, you can measure all kinds of things, but in this particular case, my vibration, you could make a statement, my vibration is 10,000 vibrations per second or higher, and push down. If it doesn't move or moves only slightly, that's true. And then you raise the
Keep
level.
going.
You go to the next 10,000 or whatever. And that's how the measurement works. Now
Hmm.
it is, holding your arm too rigid or not enough, or pushing potentially, super strongly or not enough. So there's a learning curve of how to do it. But it does help if you have some benchmark that you're
Mm.
testing against. But that's how it works in general. I am going to bring out a course on it, but
Great.
that's not ready yet.
Yeah. It takes a little trial and error, a little practice to learn that, just like any sort of exercise, so to speak. It's good to practice it because it just becomes easier every time you do it then. And your reading may be more accurate then.
Yes, and I will comment that I know that other people in spirituality have learned other techniques to be
Mhm.
able to measure
Mhm.
with muscle testing. So pendulums or
Mhm.
other techniques. I don't know much about those, but
Right, exactly. I've also with a couple of other practitioners I know who use the body as a pendulum, so to speak, and others who use breath to how you breathe when you ask a question and wait for the answer. So
right,
to use your body's consciousness, I suppose,
right,
is is a is a handy tool to have. Good thing in your back pocket. It's really
yeah,
interesting, Raymond. It's interesting. You cover a lot of really interesting things in the sense that you have a spiritual toolbox. It feels like that you're trying to hand off to us. That's very practical and very usable in order for us to achieve our lives as true creators.
yes, uh, yeah, that's true. And God has said to me, uh, you know, actually, I asked God one day. I said, If I tell people that I talk with God, they're going to think I'm crazy
Mhm.
and or delusional.
Mhm.
And should I be doing that? And God said, I absolutely want you to do that because every person on the planet can speak to God
Mhm.
if they learn to raise their energy to get over that hurdle, and God welcomes every person to do so. So that's why I am, that I'm sharing everything that I can. I think it is important for humanity at this time. Yeah, we all need to be stepping up to share the wealth.
Stepping up to our spiritual plates. I like that you say to share the wealth. Can you share what that means?
Well, I mean, share what is good.
Hmm.
Uh, there is a wealth of wisdom. Different people, different teachers have different tool sets and different knowledge bases and different skills to offer, and it's all good. There's not one
Mhm.
single set of things that work, and different things are needed for people at different points along their way. But if that message that God intends the best for everyone, and that humanity has gotten off on this track of being in total separation, etc., if we can move ourselves past that, keep opening up, keep uh, expanding our consciousness, and if more people hear that God wants everyone to have the best life they can have, that that message, if that could just be universal, and understanding that every person on the planet is a part of God, then we would begin to change more rapidly, I think. You know, we could see the world with a new model.
Could create a new earth.
Yes.
So, Raymond, what does the council say is next for us as a humanity?
Well, by the way, the council, in that particular book, The Wisdom of the Council, they talk a lot about heaven on earth.
Uh-huh.
And they said that we are capable of creating heaven on earth right now, each within ourselves, that we cannot change the world instantly, but all change begins inside. We have to first learn to create heaven on earth within ourselves, and that will eventually project out. So I'm very much into heaven on earth.
It's a good thing. As above, so below.
Say that again.
As above, so below.
Yes, exactly right. I hadn't heard that expression lately. Yeah, exactly. That's a good expression.
We've actually had in our previous guests, that's actually been told to us by a couple of other very magical beings, very powerful beings, that our mission is to create heaven on earth.
Yes. So, well, the interesting thing about that particular book and the council is that it was very much addressed to people who are seeking to be masters
Mm-hmm.
of their life. So it, may not be for everyone. As you said, many people just trying to get through today
Right.
and solve today.
Understandably.
Yeah.
Understandably. But there's
If we
more out
can,
there. There's more out there that's available to help you get through the day.
but the more people who want to create heaven on earth within themselves, the better. It's a good thing. I am amazed about how that changed things for me. Now, there's a learning process there, and we could spend another hour talking about that. So I won't
But
go
we
there
will.
for now.
Let's talk about it again sometime. But yeah, I think that learning process is maybe where we're at the moment. That's part of the reason of having a podcast like this, podcasts
Yes,
like yours, is to
yes,
understand it and incorporate it into our actual being, into our actual essence, so that we're
right,
sort of walking the walk and talking the talk and being the bee at the same
yes.
time. Which sounds a little hippie 60. I feel like there's a desire for it. I think there's truly a desire for it among humanity now.
Yeah, and people have to understand that there is a path that we can use to create that. So again, it's a lot about communication, as you said from the very beginning. As we raise our consciousness, we will become better communicators and sharing more of the right messages.
Beautiful. I know we're almost out of time here. I want to be sure we talk about how people can get in touch with you. Do you do one-on-one training sessions? Is it group sessions? Do you do courses? Tell me about Raymond Posh.
Well, this is something new for me. I have not been a spiritual teacher or a
Mhm.
spiritual uh, or healing practitioner at
Mhm.
all. But um, what's happened for me this year is I was asked to create this course, which I did,
Mm.
and I'll say just a moment more, just a little bit more about that. But I do not currently offer one-on-one counseling or coaching at this point.
Mhm.
I may at a future time. Right now, I do have a website. It's called Raymond Posh, POSCH.com. And on that site, I now have information about my new Become a Master of Life course. And it can be purchased at my website. And I'm sure there will be more to come. There will be more courses that I'm being asked to develop.
Mhm.
And I may get into coaching, but I certainly am open to people asking questions. But RaymondPosh.com, and you can learn about me there. I do a lot of different things, including the 2 podcasts that we talked about. New Ways of Being
Mhm.
is my current active podcast, and they can find that on any podcast platform.
And I'm sorry, the course that you're teaching again is called?
New Ways of Being, excuse me, that's my podcast. Become a Master of Life,
Okay.
How to Know and Use God Energy.
Okay. And that's an online course, is it how long is it?
It's a it's it's a course with 4 modules. But I it's a audio course, so it's available on an audio platform called Soundwise, but you have to go through the purchase process. But
Sounds great. Well, Raymond, I'm going to wrap this up. You're a really interesting person, I must say, and your willingness and desire to work in this community, to work in this realm of understanding consciousness from a very practical level into a very expansive level
right.
is a real blessing to everyone.
Well, thank you, and thank you so much for having me.